Okay, welcome back to members of a 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, an ongoing study in G.W. Hegel. And we're going to take a look at a specific lesson in his Phenomenology of Spirit again. We're going to go to, I found a very interesting study. We're going to go to pages 147 to 162 on the doctrine of observing reason. It's a very, very good study. And you'll notice that with anything that Hegel teaches, your overriding triad is always logic, essence, and spirit. So you'll notice block 1 is logic, block 2 essence, and block 3 spirit. But it's going to be centered on the doctrine of observing reason, and therefore the logic always gives us the specific logic of the triad from the very beginning. So you know exactly where he's going. So block 1 will give us the triad for this lesson. So let's go to block 1. We'll get started. The logic of observing reason. And the 3 steps are observation of finite consciousness, particularity, then 2, observation of transitioning consciousness, generality, and then 3, observation of intrinsic being, universality. So the triad is going to be particularity, generality, and universality. It's so very, very Hegelian. So we begin with the block 1, note 1, observation of finite consciousness. And this is what most people in our culture believe. The self takes the sensate as that which is true. Sensate surface reality is taken as the true. This is sensate apprehension without any interpretive contemplative work. It falls short of true noesis perception. The self must transition from sensate particulars to identifying the signifying universals. There must be a transition. So we go to block 1, note 2, observation of the transitioning consciousness, where the self begins to form the abstract generalities. The self identifies a uniform recurrence in finitude, but finitude is still recognized as singular actualities. At this stage, there's no recognition of a system or a plan or a direction for creation. Then the self recognizes what can be raised up movement of being within finitude. The transition begins when we find spirit behind finitude. And Hegel calls this a raised up movement. There's something more behind finite surface reality. There's something more there that begins to reveal itself. And it's a little sign-like trigger that triggers the self into recognizing that there is a spiritual being within, behind finitude. Surface reality has something spiritual within it or behind it, and it's a movement of raising up the surface reality into something higher and more significant. Observation becomes entering into the first stages of rational analysis. Hegel says this is where we begin doing rational analysis, spiritual rational analysis. Sensate surface reality is no longer prioritized. That is what our culture needs to get to. Our culture lives according to surface reality and only surface reality, There's no recognition of any spiritual presence. But the self must get to that point where the sensate surface reality is no longer that which is prioritized. We're ready to move into Block 1, Note 3, the observation of intrinsic universal being. And notice that Hegel calls it intrinsic, within finitude itself. It's already there, being raised up through it. The observation of intrinsic universal being. The self transitions to the, I love this line, the self transitions to the boundary line of the universal. Generality is divided into a duality. The self begins to recognize an intrinsic spiritual being and a contingent sensate reality. So our world is a contingent sensate reality, but behind it there is an intrinsic spiritual presence of being. Spiritual perception breaks loose from generality, and that's called what? Noesis in the Greek. Spiritual perception breaks loose from generality. We cognitively reach the explicit universal. That's noesis. Remember the summary chart. Always place these studies into our general summary chart to get an idea of what Hegel's talking about, because he assumes that his readers, this is a part of the problem with Hegel, he always assumes that his readers know his system inside out. Before they even read page 1, Hegel just assumes and demands that his readers know his system in its entirety before they even turn to page 1. And that's why people get lost. But Hegel won't tolerate it. He does not help the reader whatsoever. That's why he has a reputation of being the most difficult philosopher to have ever lived. And he is extremely difficult because you have to know his system before you can even begin to go to page 1. And Hegel demands that. So it's tough because you go, well, I got to read it to learn it. And Hegel says, well, you need to have already known it before you begin to even read it. And that's, of course, a huge problem, a catch-22. But in this lesson, keep the summary chart in mind at all times, because this will be integrated into that summary chart. So we're talking about noesis, obviously. We are talking about noesis. Okay, let's continue on here. So, spiritual perception breaks loose from generality, and it reaches the division of the real into major categories and concepts that are abbreviated under those major categories. So this is noesis, this is spiritual perception. And when we get to that stage, we're ready to move into Block 2 and consciousness of the essence of reality. Now we move out of logic, we move into essence. Let's go to Block 2. Now we look at the transition in consciousness of the essence of existence. We begin with the systematic notion of reason. The raised up movement of being within finitude takes place. Objects are recognized to contain within themselves a being for the self. We start to visualize a reality that takes us up within it. This kingdom of God is that kingdom which is for reality and also for humanity. We recognize a being for the self within this raised up movement of the kingdom. This is a first step in recognizing the emerging essence behind existence. Now we're recognizing a spiritual essence behind surface existence. Emerging essence behind existence. Being at rest and being in relation conflict with each other in our cognitive observation. So one concept is maintaining itself as an individual concept, but at the same time, it's in relation to other concepts. We're starting to recognize a systematic presence of essence behind existence. There's a relational kingdom where concepts are related to each other. We're starting to recognize relationships of ideas. Relationships between concepts are recognized. There is a tendency toward understanding. Go to the summary chart, katanoese, or katanoesis, and that is a tendency toward understanding, or a latency of potential moving toward becoming actual. So we're going to start understanding relationships between concepts. The essence of existence is a collective of divine concepts that make up the kingdom, and they are related to each other. We visualize a world view, a kingdom world view. And Ross has shared one with us many times. But in that model that Ross shares with us, there are spiritual concepts, and they are arranged in a circular model that gives us a picture of the essence of existence, a Christian worldview. And Hegel's doing the same thing. Hegel was a believer, and Hegel says, when you get to the point of starting to recognize essence of existence, you realize there's a relational model between all of these concepts. So we have block 2, note 3, essence transitions to spirit when perception moves to understanding. Put a big circle around that heading. Essence transitions to spirit when perception moves to understanding. When noesis moves to katanoesis. When noesis moves to katanoesis. We start seeing relationships between concepts. And I love this. Look at C. Block 2, note 3, C. The self is ready to move beyond the boundary of finitude. I love that. I love that. We're going to move beyond the boundary of finitude into the realm of spirit. We are going to move beyond the boundary of finitude into the realm of spirit. And this is Hegel's raised up movement. Block 2, note 3, C, D, and E. The self is ready to move beyond the boundary of finitude into the realm of spirit, which is what Hegel calls the raised up movement of the spiritual. The raised up movement of the spiritual being lifted up through finitude, and concepts become recognized as combined, interrelated concepts. Concepts become recognized as combined, interrelated concepts. So we've looked at the logic of observing reason in block 1. We've looked at the essence of existence in block 2. Now we're going to look at the realm of spirit in block 3. Logic and essence moved on to the realm of spirit in block 3. Block 3, note 1, the self transitions from finite determinations to that which is in its truth. we observe the vanishing moment of finite determinations and the creation of the pure moment of abstract universality in the light of the notion. Now, the notion for Hegel is his word for a sign that points beyond itself. Not a mere concept, but a sign that points beyond itself. The light of the notion overcomes sensate observation. The self transitions to the realm of spirit and intrinsic spiritual being, which is a notion of necessity. We take up the next step, the universality of reason, the work of universality and spiritual reasoning. So block 3, note 3, the universality of reason. Universality becomes present and actual for us. We start seeing glimpses of the kingdom. We start seeing spiritually, with spiritual vision, that which ought to be, that which ought to be, that which is the genuine spiritual true, as possessing that which is real. Surface reality is not the real. Spiritual reality is the real. So we start to visualize that which possesses the real. We find evidence of universal spiritual law. And by analogy and inference, we apply this to all our concepts. We attain under the pure notion in what? The act of positing. What's the realm of spirit for Hegel? It's the realm of positing. The realm of positing is the realm of presenting our biblical worldview, the realm of presenting our sign model, and seeking the recognition of other persons. We want to persuade them to recognize our worldview as the true, as the genuine true. So it's a presentation of the truth of the gospel, a biblical worldview, and it comes together as a sign model, and it is posited as an internal externality. What does that mean? It means that yes, we form that sign model internally, but we put it forth externally as a filter through which we visualize the world, a filter through which we act in the world. So it becomes an internal externality. Yes, it is subjective. It is something we formed inside in the inner self. But it's right at the forefront of our mind. It's a filter. It's a filter through which we visualize relationships, through which we visualize the world through, and through which we act in the world, and through which we act in relationships. It's always through our sign model worldview that we call up to the very forefront of our mind. It is internal, it is subjective, but it is right at the edge of objectivity. It's a filter. It's an internal externality. Go back to the summary chart again. That entire right half of the chart is the realm of spirit. The entire right half of that summary chart is the realm of positing. That's going to wrap up Hegel's doctrine of observing reason, Phenomenology of Spirit, pages 147 to 162.